Welcome everyone to this wonderful session. Lovely to be among all of you, and really an eclectic panel. People in the panel who have come from the development world on the mobile side, on the publishing side, and also from the entire PC console development. So I'm really glad to be among all of you in this session on emerging gaming ecosystem. And in the next 45 minutes, what we're going to do is try and sort of sweep through what this country has gone ahead in the entire gaming world, and then try and get some insights specifically on what has changed. What is that? If you are in the development space, what would you be looking forward? If you're a consumer, what would you be looking forward for? And cover a host of things right from the development, publishing, funding into this ecosystem, revenue models. Let's see what we can get done. So, guys, warm welcome to all of you. Gautam, Kaushal, Chong-U, welcome to this entire show. And I'm really glad to be among all of you.
Thank you, Raghav. Thanks for having us.
So if it's okay with you guys, I'll just start out with a couple of slides on where the industry is in India before I come to you guys. And then your profiles are there, so most guys would know you. But then I would then come to you, and probably I would like if you guys want to say a couple of sentences to introduce yourself, and then begin on some of the questions. But before we do that, I'll just set up the context with a couple of slides, if that's okay. So we're looking at the emerging ecosystem in India, and if you really look at it, you will see that this entire gaming ecosystem is looking to grow at around 21%, which is a very healthy growth. Obviously, it is driven by a lot of hyper casual games and others coming in. Mobile has a very large share of it, and obviously, the entire ecosystem is going to grow from a 63 billion INR to about a 94 billion INR. But the important thing here is while we have 455 million gamers, and that is really due to all the infrastructure, 5G, and all of that, the penetration is still low, for just 32%. There is a huge amount of area to grow, and that's what we'll talk about today when we'll talk about the opportunities. And if you look at it in a different way in terms of revenue, this is where the black thing here is very heartening. If you look at 5, 6 years back, the in-app purchases very less. It was all advertisement driven. Now the in-app purchases are growing thanks to all the payment innovations that have happened, and that is setting a tone for India suddenly being a monetizable market. And in-app purchases will be the fastest growing segment. So that is really changed from the last time we looked at it 4, 5 years back. And there is a whole genre of games. Shooting games are most monetized, hyper casual games are most downloaded, but there is a host of ecosystem developing when we look at the new revenue models that are coming. The key things I would probably touch upon is, we're looking at the pipeline, and I'm going to have questions around how are you looking at the pipeline of development, how are you looking to sort of publish them. We are also going to talk about, if time permits, the use of AI in the development space. We're also going to look at a few things of cloud gaming and beyond, and how that has affected the entire space. So there's a host of things to talk about. So I just to set that context, that we are growing at about 21 plus percent. We are almost going to about 930 million plus from an INR rupees point of view. Guys, I don't think that we need to really talk about, we are in the right place at the right time in the right market. But I just want to probably open with this. I've been part of the gaming panels for the last 20 plus years, and having set up this foundation. Uh, the gaming ecosystem has evolved, right? And there is a host of things that happened. We started out as development agencies, working for global companies, doing some mobile development, doing porting, doing host of things, and that has evolved. And we also started doing some development. Now I'm hearing a lot of AAA titles. So, Kaushal, if I can start with you, how have you seen this entire evolution happening, and what are the changes that you see have happened in this space?
So Raghav, to start with, last 21 years that I've been in the industry have been very, very interesting. I mean, I've really seen the transition happening in India, from early 2000s, when you would only hear of like three companies across the country, and very few professionals. We really didn't have even enough means to get to know each other. So I used to work in Delhi, and then I would hear of companies in Bangalore and other parts of the Pune or other parts of the country, and we really didn't have any means to know what's out there. And all it was 3-4 companies that we know of, and most of them again working in the services sector. So we were catering out to other developers and other markets. So yeah, that was the time. A little bit of a dark ages, if you may call it, because nobody knew anybody. Nobody knew if there was an industry. Uh, I'm pretty sure a lot of our parents didn't approve of the career as well. My parents were like, what should you? I mean, eventually they got to terms with it, but there was a very little exposure on when you were working in on the video game side of things, and which is where 20 years ago, you know uh, my company had, we were doing a bit of QA, a bit of art, and then we had programmers who were doing, like, those were the days, like J2ME and Brew stuff, and they were working on porting mainly, and doing some non-core programming jobs for companies outside. And so that was the time. There was no no formal education. There was no visibility on the industry itself. Nobody knew if gaming industry existed. It was somewhere in the hiding in the doldrums, cocooned inside the entire IT revolution that was happening
Correct.
uh, in the country. And from there, it has changed. I mean, 2010s again. I think that's when the thing started happening, and NASCOM taking in gaming under its wings was a good step. I remember attending my first NASCOM meet. It was in Delhi, and it was, I think, back in 2011. And we were like handful of people, like maybe 20-25 people in a room, discussing how the industry is going to fare up, what we can do, what we can build out of it. A lot of us were working on the services side. We were just uh, contemplating and picking our brains around uh, what we can do in the industry. And one of the suggestions I had was, for India to really make a mark, we need India specific content. And uh, which has changed. I mean, with Raji, I'm like so happy it has done well. And you are seeing India specific content now. uh, so the things started growing from that point onwards. You started seeing other people. It started evolving as a community. It was NASCOM GDC at that time, so NASCOM GDC started slowly again growing in its rights. Seeing a bunch of people, but again, uh, the progress was in the 2010s, at least in the first half. The progress was slow. It's only, you know you would hear of Nazara or Jet Synthesis, or some
or
companies.
an or even an India Games and a Dhruva kind of thing. That I remember back in 2007 setting
Yeah.
up the AVGC for NASCOM, and it was a bunch of guys in that entire ecosystem. Now, those Kaushal absolutely resonate with what you're saying. So, what has changed after that? What has been happening in the space?
So 2020s, I think, has been an exciting time. Uh, you see a lot more happening. There is a lot more awareness. Good things, you have universities teaching gaming right now, with Upscale and Backstage and all those initiatives happening. So I also work with a friend who kind of does helps gaming, not gaming, but he helps universities build up the course content uh, for their curriculum. And uh, I've been kind of working with him. He kind of reached out to me a year back, and telling me that hey, we want to do every university. In fact, a lot of universities in Northeast, in North, lovely professional universities, especially, they want to build up a gaming curriculum. And which is where it's just exciting to see that now people have started recognizing this uh, as an industry. At the same time, I see a uh, lot of games, not just mobile games coming out of Indian developers. So when you go to last year's IGDC, for example, you could see kids, fresh out of school or colleges, they built up a game and then they had a stall showcasing that, and you didn't see that like 10 years back. Absolutely, all you had was some mobile titles. I was also a part of IGDC's award committee for a few years, and I would sit down and evaluate each game that got submitted, and the quality has improved. Definitely, what we are seeing right now, it's a big departure of from what we were seeing in 2014, 15, 16, and I think we are in the right direction. Of course, there are still issues to be addressed, needs to be achieved. It's not that we are in a perfect place, but of course, as far as the direction and the progression goes, to know about the future, you need to analyze the past, and then you can figure out the future trends, and which is where the past certainly has been progressive, especially last 10 years. I mean, I was really surprised our honorable prime minister mentioning
Yes.
this year, and yeah, though he has been talking about it for some time, and uh, uh, I think, yeah, that there is something definitely for us to look forward into the future. But yeah, with limitations. We still need to mature as an industry. We still need to dig deeper into issues. So, for example, if you see the West, right, I've been into conferences that are focused on uh, you know linguistic or translation alone, and then you have like audio and translation professionals, 600, 700 people just gathered in a conference, just discussing about audio and translation in gaming, or the conferences which are just focused on quality, and this is something that to the stage that we need to evolve, and yeah, I think we need a bit more depth. As far as another challenge I see is, though we have a lot of technical talent around, but somehow uh, the production talent just isn't there. The level of production could do with improvement, and uh, which includes conceptualizing design, and then polishing the game, and which is where when you see these titles, you can understand they are working with limited budgets. They don't have they still don't have uh, the kind of triple A budgets needed for a triple A title. But again, a lot of indies in India, uh, and you can see that they are having to choose between putting in content, or polishing polishing the game, because they are working against timelines and budgets, uh, and which is where I think we need a bit more focus, if we really are to make India into that a competitive gaming scale.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there are very important points you made in terms of how this industry has sort of grown in depth with new kids, new people coming in and developing stuff. You've also spoken about how we've evolved from services to develop content on our own and put up those content. That is a big change that has happened. Yes, I think there is a host of stuff that is important in terms of capital coming in. There is a lot of things that we need to change in the industry, and we'll come to it in a minute as we go along this conversation. But I think what you just touched upon is a good segment to sort of bring in Chong-U. You've been doing a lot of development and also talking to publishers, looking at the publishing ecosystem, and so on and so forth. One of the banes in this country has been a lack of a good big publisher and also lack of AAA development, right? Do you see that changing, and I think what do we need to do to sort of step up on that paradigm?
Yeah, thanks, Raghav. Yeah, I think absolutely right. There's a great opportunity, for India to actually, come up with its own version of, like your Tencents and your Electronic Arts. I think the thing that Kaushal mentioned just now is actually really true. First of all, there's so much raw talent that's in India. Whether it's technical, whether it's design, But one of the biggest challenges to being something like a publisher is really about landing player value, landing the customer value, and landing a product that somebody can hold and really experience to the highest quality. And to do something like that is not easy. First of all, it needs a lot of money, right? You look at the marketing budgets compared to the development budgets of all the global publishers, right? A lot of people don't realize how much, how big the disparity is. And then the second thing is that exactly that, like technology, like being able to have really great development talent, it's not sufficient, because you need to have the processes as well as the production value at the forefront. And sometimes this means that you end up having to do a lot of things where you put things into the hand of the users very early on. We've seen this with games on mobile devices, right? Like where they operate with a live service mindset, and we've seen almost like the entire market shift towards that notion of a live service game. Because why? The main thing is that gone are the days where you have one creative director, who oversees multiple studios and determines, okay, I'm going to do the next Rainbow Six, and then this is how it's going to be, and then I'm going to put it out there, and then people will love it, right? I think nowadays people are just spoiled for choice, and they're going to have to be able to understand what the player really wants in this market. And in this day and age, people are not reading newspapers anymore. People are not reading gaming websites or gaming magazines. People are watching on TikTok. People are, and that's the reason why Tencent became so popular, is because like they were able to leverage the messaging system of what people were using day to day. So I would say, like, there's a massive opportunity just given the size, the talent. Just needs like kind of like a consolidation of effort, and kind of like being able to move very quickly in order to engage with what the audience today wants. And just one final point to play on this. I mean, they are really local unicorns, like Dream11, MPL. They're really dominating the regional markets, right? But I think it's like this: how do we push it out? Just getting out to the global presence. It's not an overnight thing. Like these companies have done a really good job of getting there. I think what we've seen now, especially at Light Fury, is that there are a lot of people who are around the globe. They've gone, they've worked, with your EAs, your Ubisofts of the world, and they are now saying, hey, you know what? Like, I want to actually come back to India to help to nurture this talent. I think like Kaushal was like, referring to that. Like, there's so much, like, not just in the development space, but in the universities, the game development programs. And I think, like, I've personally seen this with the candidates that we've interviewed, that we've hired. And I think with this kind of like I think with all of this, there's just going to be a massive like push and to elevate India as like a global publisher.
Very interesting. I think, yes, there is the opportunity, but you pointed out to the very right things. You said, how do we land the customer value? I think that's important. And landing customer value is a process. That's I think very nicely put, because publishing is a process. You look at the marketing dollars, you look at what you're spending through the funnel, where are you adding value? We speak about all the Chinese games releasing on a Thursday night because Friday the workers sort of pick it up. There is a process to it. And once you get that process and the pipeline going along with that process, that's when the development starts. And then there is a host of things that can happen. And I'm also very glad about what you said about the talent, about the bigger publishers coming back to India and wanting to train that talent. I think that's going to make a big difference in the whole ecosystem. Absolutely. Lovely. I think that's setting up this conversation very nicely. And it is about time, hence I asked the other question, right? Chong-U spoke about the fantasy gaming guys, we spoke about the hyper casual guys, the mobile guys, and all of that. Gautam, the PC and console. I mean, this has been a bane in this country for a long time, and previously we used to blame the hardware prices. Now our per capita has gone up, right? So there are hosts. Obviously, the console prices have also gone up, but not in the same ratio. And I also see this huge thing about piracy was the biggest problem at that point in time, and that has also got tackled. Good or bad, I don't know. I mean, there used to be guys buying 50 rupees PC games and then playing that on CD, but that's no longer possible. Specifically, PC and console. What do you see as an opportunity in India, and do you think this country will pick up on those parameters?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I think absolutely right. I think both Kaushal and Chong-U have made excellent points. And I think that also trickles down into the PC and console side of things. You see a lot more developers now working on PC console games, trying to make smaller indie kind of games. Some people trying to make higher, big quality, and bigger, high quality games as well, right? The In terms of consumption, I think even that has gone a lot higher in the entire country. I think the digital age has helped that, like you said, from going from physical copies of games, playing games on discs is no longer like a norm. Like it's most people are more comfortable with playing games on Steam, on Epic Game Store, and such, right? I think that in a way like reduces the piracy by itself. Um, but you also see like from 10 years ago to now, the number of people that are playing games and actually playing games on Steam from India, that's gone like multifold, that has grown.
Yeah.
So even if you're looking at like India as a market, I'm not sure of the numbers, but I'm sure that that market is opening up in the future. I think there is going to be like a market that is specific to India. I know traditionally it's been more of free to play kind of market, but yeah, in general, in for the consumers as well as the developers, I think both have recognized PC and console to be a viable option. You also notice the hardware companies like Sony and Xbox, and everyone is now coming on board to support local developers to see how they can bring that one game or two games that can break out into the industry, and that will eventually kickstart the whole industry of like development of PC and console.
So, Gautam, so when you are developing games today on PC and console, are you looking at the Indian market? Are you looking sort of to saddle the global market? Does India still have a market, or we need to sort of look at the global market to make this work?
I mean, to be completely honest, I think the Indian market is a very, very small
Yeah.
piece of the pie when you're looking at a PC and console. Uh, so, for us personally, we do look at the entire world as a market, like especially being making indie games. We don't specifically do any India-centric games, and I personally believe at this point it is still true that we need to look at a bigger market
Bigger market.
to be able to, yeah.
And that's where I think our efficiencies and cost of production, of course, we still need to scale up on the quality, but cost of production really kicks in, and then we can look at that from that point of view. No, that's a
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
one. That's a great one. Now, I want to just to anyone who wants to look at it, I just want to open up this forum to a few questions on the revenue model side, right? We saw the slide where previously it was all India was about free to download, free to play kind of games, and then in-app was not there, payment mechanisms were not there, 38 million credit cards and all of that, and it was not linked. Suddenly, in-app purchases becomes prominent. People are spending, money there. There are other revenue streams that are coming up. So, in terms of revenue model, are you guys seeing a change, and is it becoming more lucrative in India? Anybody who wants to pick it up, Chong-U, if you want to go.
Yeah, I can go first. I'll first of all say like I'm not the most well versed, in the mobile market in India specific to revenue because we're pre-revenue. But we've done a lot of research into what we are going to be doing for our very first title, right? So I would divert to Kaushal and Gautham to add more to this. But what I can say is that exactly what you say. I mean, these are not the proliferation of mobile devices and the expansion of the different ways of monetizing users has whether it's in-app purchases, whether it's like a subscription base, whether it's a one-off, and I think one-off purchases are actually still pretty are still pretty prevalent in this day and age. But I think the main thing that we've really focused on is that we know that users crave content. That is the most important thing, right? Because you're not just buying a product or a game to play just once. People want to see more, and in this day and age you don't just ship a game once and let it you have downloadable content and all that kind of stuff. And on mobile devices it's especially so because for you to buy content on, say, a PC, on a console, right? Like, there's quite a few modalities. You got to get a credit card out. You can save a credit card on your phone. With the, with Google Pay, Apple Pay. Like it's almost like part of the ecosystem. So you reduce the barrier of entry, right? And I think like that's something that we've really observed. The second thing, and this is my own like learning, I've been spending a lot of time with my team and understanding the market. Like, I think the number one thing to recognize, especially for India and the Indian market in particular, is a lot of the concepts that we have globally about spending behavior and approaches. We need to tailor it for the audience. And I'll give a very one clear example, right? So one example is that if you think typically, and this correct me if I'm wrong, but typically if you have something that say costs you a recurring cost a month versus a one-off purchase, right? Most people will think, okay, if it costs cheaper for me to buy it one shot in 1 year,
Yeah.
I will do that, right? Whether it's 10% cheaper, 20% cheaper. But actually, if you look at the different regions, that's not true, right? Some people do not want to have this front-loaded commitment to pay, even if it's 10% cheaper, 20% cheaper, 50% cheaper, right? Because they always want the option to cancel anytime. And I think these are the kind of like things that game developers really need to tune themselves again. Because if you just take any like profile or behavior or stats from say so a different market and you apply it to India, you're going to be in for a really rough time. Because it's not like just say, oh, it's going to be cheaper, so definitely they're going to buy us. No, because sometimes people just want to be able to trial it out and have the option to cancel earlier. So those are the kind of my insights. But I said, I think Gautam and Kaushal probably have a lot more experience in terms of like monetization, design, and where the market is really bringing them.
No, you're right. Absolutely right. I think the fact that the payment is part of the ecosystem and on the mobile device it is easier is driving that entire thing. So I think that's an important thing. But when you guys are developing Kaushal Gautam, are you seeing a revenue model change, and is it becoming more lucrative in this country and beyond?
So my previous job, we were doing hyper casual games, and these were mostly free to play games. And for all of the titles that we were developing, India was amongst the top 5 markets. So again, the free to play is still quite big. In-app purchases, again, I don't have the data, and I'm not too sure about how things have been moving. But yeah, definitely, like Chong, you mentioned, the buyer sentiments have been changing, and people are latching on to different monetization types. Even for PC consoles, I was quite surprised to see some videos on social media where people were queuing up for God of War Ragnarok launch and buying it. So that's something, again, you didn't see in the past. Uh, the urban modern buyer in India right now is a lot more aware, and they are willing to pay. They are willing to pay for quality, uh, from what I understand.
That is interesting. Now, Gautam, hence I want to ask, especially also in the PC mobile PC ecosystem, console, and also to a large extent the mobile ecosystem, there is the entire change in revenue model from cloud gaming coming in subscription oriented gaming on one side, and there is also a lot of cloud hardware, right? So you can now log in to your hardware, and then your phone suddenly becomes a super gaming phone because the hardware is in the servers. Cloud gaming, cloud hardware, do you see that making a dent in this market? Is that something that is going to change this dynamics globally in India?
I think it's a globally awaited thing, and I know Google tried it, and it's not happening anymore from their side. But it is. I think it still is a dream that a lot of people want to be able to play any game they want without being restricted by their own hardware. So if I can run my game off a server on the cloud and I get the experience, I think it is a viable option and an opportunity for whoever is trying to do that kind of like availability. But I don't think it's matured yet. Like I don't think people have been able to crack that of uh, how do I get high quality, how much data is it going to take to transfer all of this high quality visuals, and I think one of the biggest thing is also the lag of the input that it's going to take because of going through the internet. But having said that, I think it's still a dream that people are trying to pursue, and if it works out, I think it's going to be monumental. It's going to be something that everyone would love to have. Even the hardware guys are doing it in their own capacity with PlayStation and Nintendo and everyone streaming from their hardware to your phones. Uh, but yeah, I don't think we're there at a point in this development where we're like, okay, this works, right? Yeah, that's what I feel.
Yeah. So I think on the hardware front, you're saying that still with all the lag and the latency issues, there's still some time to go. That is great. But on the cloud gaming from a subscription point of view, the Game Pass and all of that, do you see that as a different ecosystem? Is that an answer to India not wanting to buy 4,000 rupee a game in the PC console space?
I think not just India, but globally, this model is being tested. It is working a lot for a few companies. So it is more popular now. You see a lot more games coming on these subscription platforms. In fact, one of our games was recently part of the PlayStation Plus as well. So it kind of gives indie developers or smaller developers like a huge opportunity to put your game in front of a lot of people, right? And for the people, it also gives like I subscribe, I pay like 4,000 rupees or whatever number that is, but I get to experience a lot of games. And I know like I can test. It goes back to your free to play versus paid games. So this gives that kind of opportunity where you're paying one time for the year or one time for like 3 months, but I get access to a lot of these games. But this is going to be a chicken and egg because do I get all of the games that I want in this subscription? Do I get the latest and the best? Do I get the newest FIFA that launches that's part of the subscription? I think that lies in that balance of like how the company is doing these subscriptions.
How do you package it? And that's almost talking a Netflix or an
Yeah,
OTT.
it is.
It's that kind of a
Absolutely.
phenomenon. No, interesting. Now, just to sort of touch upon from a consumer point of view, I think what kind of games, what genres do you see working in India as against the others? And I know it's a very broad brush. Also, from the consumer point of view, what's the kind of participation that you've seen? We've seen that the women participation was less now that consumer demographics is changing. So both from the genre of games and the type of consumers, what insights can you throw from what you guys have seen in this market?
I have very limited knowledge on that, but I can start with my 2 cents. I feel like especially with the PC side of things, uh, what's more popular worldwide is popular here.
Mhm.
So if you're trying to like look at what games are working right now, it's usually the top 10 that's in the world as well. Um, but specific to like the Indian market, I think the other guys can talk
Yeah.
more.
Kaushal, any thoughts on that?
Yep, yep. I think again, yeah, demographics are changing. The gamer base is changing. Hyper casual and casual is big on mobile. I mean, you can see pretty much, uh, from uh, from someone driving an auto to someone, in the bus or you know in the metro. You'll usually see someone playing Candy Crush or somebody dabbling with some sort of a hyper casual game. So that again, and that's what my experience was in my previous company, developing, helping develop hyper casual games as well. That India is a big market. Apart from that, I would say the current ecosystem, the colleges. So every engineering college at this point in time has got a tech fest, and then tech fest has got a gaming fest, and that gaming fest has got some sort of an FPS tournament or some sort of a Need for Speed or a racing game tournament happening. So FPS is again, my colleagues and my teams were big into Counter Strike, Valorant, yeah, lot of this stuff. So it's still quite big. Again, console gaming is on the rise as well. I see a lot of people buying PlayStation 5 right now. I know more than what I used to know 10 years back. People who have Game Passes, they're pushing me to buy one as well. Like, why don't you buy a Game Pass? I like my like niche of games. So, uh, but yeah, definitely the trend is changing. And yeah.
So in this country, I think that's also interesting, right? One, the fantasy has grown out, RMG has grown out. While they're recent, startups off the block, but they've really scaled, given what they've done on the transaction space. But esports, what's your view on esports in this market? Is that helping the overall game development here, or the recognition of games? Do you think esports is an enabler, and what do you think of the esports market in overall here? Any of you?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think esports 100%, right? Like it's just like the growth trajectory is just is pretty crazy. I think if we actually think about what actually contributes to an esports title, first of all, it's competitive, right? So you can, easy to pick up for people who enjoy, but it's difficult to master. So people who are really good at it become really good at it.
Mm.
Third thing, it needs to be enjoyable. You need to watch. So some people they love watching Valorant videos, but you ask them to play, no.
No.
Even take EAFC, right? EAFC, those professional players, Rocket League, they are not only fun to play, but they're really fun to watch when you see the really, really pro players, like going at it, right? So 100% esports has contributed to kind of like raising the awareness of the audience. People enjoy watching it, so you increase who can participate in there. And I think games are no longer just about holding a gamepad or a mobile device. They're about streaming it in, being on the community forums, discussing the latest tactics, hypothesizing about the backstory of this character. So I think that's like a really, really important thing to think about esports. The second thing is really about esports is that the reason why esports is really hard to craft is that it's a big combination of creative. So it needs to be visually appealing. It needs to have a great design and backstory. It's technically really challenging because if it's easy to cheat or it causes any problems with, being able to exploit, you only have one shot, right? Like once it becomes exploitable. So what has contributed a lot to enabling esports to flourish nowadays is also the tools, right? If you actually look, if you're building an esports title, you need, your server to be running all the validation and the verification of like player positions, the shooting, like the points. And in the past, it was very difficult. You had to write all this from scratch, right? You have to go and do everything yourself. Whereas now, if I think like Unreal Engine is now becoming, very, very popular. It's become so accessible. The democratization of these large engine tools, and then you throw in I think Gautham was mentioning as well. Now you throw in like the different asset stores. You throw in the ecosystem of open source libraries. So what has happened is that like even though it started off with like I want to make a competitive game that is fun to play, it's fun to watch, and then I need the technology behind that as well as the development know-how to be able to produce that. So all in all, this ends up enabling the rest of the sector. So maybe even if you're not building an esports title, but the tools are there to make a great multiplayer game. Right, and it could be a farming simulator. You could be a farming game where you have like tens of thousands of people playing, but you end up using the same same tool sets, right? Because you need to have a server, you need a multiplayer. So I think that's my take on how esports has really, really like pushed both like the engagement for the players, the people who watch it, but the ecosystem around like the tools, the development process, the familiarity with using these tools, which I think in the past wasn't as prevalent. So that's my take on how
That's a very nice take. I mean, on one end, while it has sort of increased the entire viewership and gaming universe, but for the development community, like you said, the fact that I have the game engines, the fact that I have the tools, I have the simulators, I have the servers where I could sort of put it, and the libraries, game libraries to borrow from. The development life cycle has become that much more livelier. I wouldn't say easier, but I think more collaborative in that
Exactly.
essence, and that gives even a normal game development, even if it's not esports, a leg to sort of step up and do that. That's very interesting. Now, I mean, with that, I want to ask you this question, guys. One of the things that have been constraining this market has been capital coming in, right? There isn't too much of institutional investments coming into this space, and that's starting to change. There are many startups coming up. There are funds looking to participate. In terms of capital into the game development and the game publishing ecosystem, I won't talk about the fantasy and all that's very well monetized. Uh, on the game development and the publishing ecosystem, do you think it has changed? Do you think capital is easier, more tougher? Are institutional guys participating? How do you see this landscape? Kaushal, you've been here for a long time. How do you see that entire thing changing out?
So again, my previous company, I was to help the team kind of evaluate the titles that would come in for publishing. So again, with time we saw. So I was there for 3 years, and with time we saw, lot more applications, lot more entries coming in from the India side of things. Also, the IGDC landscape, again gave us a platform to go and meet the developers and shake hands and get to know what's happening. The Definitely the interest is there, in the in in what the Indian community is doing and what Indian devs are building up right now. But as per our experience, sadly, uh, a bunch of titles just didn't cut the quality parameter that we were looking as a company to invest in at that point in time. And that's where I come back to my original point that the interest is there, but we need more production talent in the country that can at least uh, polish the games to a level where they can be appealing. Because again, my company was uh, very much looking at from a global point of view, taking an Indian game and then taking it out to the global audience, and which is where uh, the success rate from the Indian devs, to be very honest, was like not that high, and which is where if you want to bring in more investments and more publishers to get interested into what India is building, probably the best is to just look into how we are producing these games. Maybe
Yeah, that's
I
the.
don't.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying maybe we could do some. I was just giving a suggestion that some mentorship programs from some international companies or producers or something like that. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think the real investment has to be in the talent and the quality of the production. And that means we need a lot more guys who are creative directors, game designers to participate. There could be the technical developers here, but that entire gaming pipeline and the development is a completely different animal in itself. It's more complex than making a big budget movie or a big budget program, because it's a fusion of art and software. So it's a completely different ecosystem. Wonderful. Now, and I think we could spend a lot more time on talent, which is that we are running on the clock. But I think there is a lot that needs to be done on the talent front. Uh, Also, just wanted to quickly touch upon: do you see a lot of AI, Gen AI, helping in the development process, in the publishing process? Are you seeing a lot of infusion? There's all this talk about you don't have to code so much anymore. In the gaming pipelines, are you seeing a change in that? Chong-Yu, how do you see that?
Yeah, great question. Really good question. So, 100%, we are seeing the infusion of AI and Gen AI, especially. But actually, funnily enough, like a lot of people, don't realize that AI has been a very big part of the game development process, right? Planning approaches so that they are more realistic. But now we're seeing it in the development process itself. In my opinion, we have already seen it with programmers, right? ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, Cursor. So 100% we've seen the efficiencies there. I think that's no question. The other one that I've seen a lot of has been in concepting, storyboarding, getting to that initial V0, right? I think people are starting to see it's really useful to kind of like express and then kind of like visually look at what is it and then picking it from there. And the third thing is like I think this has been a traditional path for AI, is like animation, procedural animation, making retopologizing the meshes better, making motion capture, so you don't need to spend 10,000-20,000 US dollars on a motion capture rig anymore. You can, I think there's some really cool techniques around where you can just use your iPhone or your Android phone. But the biggest challenge here is they're all so far, right? Like what we've seen is that they're all really cool and very promising tech demonstrations. But I think to Gotham's point, right, this needs to be production ready. This needs to be able to not just look cool in a 5 minute, it works on my computer. It needs to land in a user's user's device. It needs to work for the artist who's doing this, and they need to familiarize themselves. And part of the problem with generative AI is that you relinquish a bit of control, right? You don't fine tune everything yourself now. You prompt, and then unless the AI application gives you like 100 knobs for you to tune, you're going to be relinquishing some control. So I think like the biggest challenge has always been in creative, in design. I think that's where it will be a little bit slower, because ultimately, as game designers, right, you want to have control over your narrative, your world. You don't want it to be generic based on a large corpus of like 700 billion parameters, right? So I think that's the opportunity, what already is taking place, but also what are some of the challenges before we really see AI take off. But definitely in games is happening as we speak.
So very good things in visualization, in doing mocap so that you can reduce it. But for it to come to the pipeline, it will take a lot more maturity, right? And also there are challenges about maintaining the same consistency across the pipeline in terms of the visualization also. So those are definitely challenges. We have sort of 5 minutes on the clock. If everybody is okay, I'll take some audience questions if that is okay. So there is a stream of questions that have been pouring in. I think I'll probably start with this one. This question is, what are the key factors that international gaming companies should consider before entering the Indian market? So if somebody is looking to enter the Indian market, what are the things that you would probably be looking at?
I think I can give my insight on that as well.
Yeah, sure.
They have to consider like some of the things that we've been talking about of how the talent pool is in India. Like we still have a long way to mature in terms of like higher level of experience on each front. So that's something that they will have to consider, and it would be a good thing to bring some people from where they're coming, as well as like have a good mix of developers here and artists, and also just an insight into like uh, what is the kind of like purchasing habits for Indians if they're looking at making games specifically for India. I think a lot of it we've discussed as a panel in this talk, so I think that's what they should consider.
That's going to be important. So understand how the population locally buys, but also get a set of developers with a mix of global talent and Indian talent to develop to the right set of quality. Wonderful. Anybody wants to add on, or should we just jump on to the next one? I think um, there's also this one where people are talking about how can the gaming industry address issues related to online safety, harassment, to create a more inclusive environment. How can we create a more inclusive environment in this, and prevent all the negative cohorts that come with the community in gaming? Any
I
thoughts?
can, I can
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
this one. So I think the first and foremost way to approach this is to see it as a priority, not as a this is like community engagement, or this is something that we add on, which is a tempting thing when you're designing the game, right? But the reason why this is a priority is because we were saying before on this entire panel today, mobile phones, are so prevalent. Most of the games now are no longer just single experiences. You talk about them on the forums, you message your friends some screenshots, it appears on social media. So a lot of these things, like inevitably, once you give the freedom of expression, of creative expression to share these things, inevitably you're going to have a mixture of the good and you're going to have a mixture of the bad. So one of the things that we learned from the very beginning is that, number one, take it as a priority. Number two, use a mixture of like technology as well as humans to curate these experiences. So, for example, if you're building one of the things that we were building last time, previous place I was at, is building like massive experiences. When you put 10,000 people in the same area with voice chat, with text chat, inevitably somebody's going to try to game the system. Somebody's going to try to do something weird. So we actually leverage both, human moderators. That's very normal, but also there's a lot of really, really cool technologies out there that looks into catching catching some of these like maybe certain words or certain expression of words, and it's getting quite complicated now because people are circumventing it, right? So I was saying, I think like if companies start to look at it as an important challenge, it is going to involve human input as well as using the nowadays like natural language processing, LLMs, even image processing, multimodal images. Like there's so much promise in enabling people to actually identify and catch these things. But I think the third most important thing is, there's the carrot and the stick, right? You can always use the stick, you ban players, you shadow ban players, but also you need to find ways to make your game incentivizing the engagers to do positive things to each other, whether it's gifting, items, or you have a Twitch streamer, he's doing Twitch drops, right? Like, it's all about receiving and giving. And I think those are the kind of three pillars towards solving this. Because if you just pick one, right, it's just, I'm just going to work on technology that captures profanity filters, you're just going on a never-ending battle like piracy, right? Whereas if you think about how you can incorporate it as part of your design, treat it as both a user value and a technology issue, and then take it as something that is a priority to solve, see it as core to your product succeeding, I think that's how you solve that problem.
I think yes. So while there is a lot of NLP available, AI and moderation, but it's about how do you incentivize, because that ethos of sharing, the ethos of giving to the community and receiving in the appreciation, that should not be moderated. I think that should be encouraged. Very well said. Very well said. Uh, there's also this question here which talks about the fact that we're almost 700 million gamers here. So, what kind of game genres would you suggest some of the developers should look into, apart from the battle royale and all of that? What should they look into so that they can do something at a lower cost but have a higher engagement? Any suggestions? I know that's a broad brush, but any suggestions on what could be Indian developers looking at?
I would suggest hyper casual.
Hyper casual, yes.
Some of those games you can build like with a team of like 2-3 people in a matter of days, right? And they don't take a lot, and if you have an interesting concept, they can hit big like overnight. And but it's, that being said, the heydays of hyper casual are long gone. So it's a very competitive market right now. It thrives on data crunching and the user habits and a lot of things. But if you just look at the cost of development, hyper casual.
Yeah, so just graduate in with a hyper casual and then sort of learn the tricks of the trade as you go from that point. Good.
Just to add on to that, just one key thing. Yes, development costs, hyper casual. One thing to leverage, user generated content. If you are struggling to produce the content, build your games to encourage players to be able to modify, skin. They are there, right? 700 million gamers. Why not 700 million content creators as well? So I think we've seen this so lucrative in like Fortnite and Epic. They incentivize people to be creators, and I think that's how you solve that problem.
Yeah, and that bringing in that UGC community is what has really hypercharged multiple streams and games and also content across the globe. And the creator ecosystem is a very robust ecosystem in India. So that is also a very good suggestion. Now, I know we are hitting the clock. I don't want to hold you guys more, but I just want to probably, wind this up with one leading question, and let's to end on a high note. Suppose, somebody were to give you $1 billion and say, go here, take it and invest in the Indian gaming market. Let me just ask each one of you, starting with you, Kaushal, where would you put your $1 billion if you were? I know, unless you already have it, but if somebody gives it to you, where are you going to put it?
I would say mobile casual. That's since again, if you have the budgets, you can look into maybe beyond hyper casuals, maybe like a basic T retention and an LTV rather than and it gives you a lot more leverage to play around with. Just having the budgets and you could do a lot of things. You can get the game early into test. So testing that these days, just the bugs doesn't work anymore. You really need to make sure that the content is appealing. It's really going on to the user the way you think that they find interesting, and then so you can do a lot with your content. Just by putting it out there, getting feedbacks. Having those cycles of building and improvements. Yeah, I would say mobile casual.
Mobile casual. Gautam, what would be your pick?
I think mine would be a little on a different note. I've seen my share of things being on like the minority in a way, where PC and console has not been like a huge point of focus. So if I had that money in a dream scenario, I would absolutely invest in PC and console developers, because I come from a side of passion of making games and passion for console games. I see a lot more studios have that pure passion of we want to build something from India for the global market. So, and I'm seeing the struggle. I'm like, okay, if I can help more people try to be here, I would absolutely put it there.
Put it there in the PC console ecosystem and grow that. Absolutely. Chong-Yu, from your point of view?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to combine both Kaushal's and Gotham's answer. I think absolutely right. Like higher production value, higher fidelity experiences. 100%. If you have that kind of budget, you can afford to really take it up to like a notch. But I think Kaushal's point about hyper casual, the reason why these things are so popular is that it needs to appeal to the mass market, right? You can build like a really, really like thin slice of like, I'm going to make the, like for example, let's take Grand Theft Auto, right? Really high production values, almost beats movie budgets, but not everybody will play it, right? Red Dead Redemption 2, another one, a good example, but not everybody will play it. So if we had that kind of budget and the ability to create that kind of value, but also allow it to become accessible through a mobile device, streaming or whatever, I think that's a great opportunity to hit kind of both the mass market as well as the high production value. So a little bit cheat of an answer, but yeah, I think that's where the opportunity would be. And
fantastic. So I think, guys, you heard it. So really, people are chasing the mass market, looking at the genres, lesser cost of production, but being able to scale up. But there is a host of things that need to get done in this market. Quality of games is one, talent is something else, capital and access to capital, and then also putting that international level pipeline into place. There is a lot to be done in this market, but I think, guys, there's been nothing short of a masterclass on what the developers could look at in this gaming market. Personal thanks to all of you, Kaushal, Gautam, Chong-Yu. Thanks for taking out the time. Some really, really valuable insights for the community here. And a big shout out to the entire set of guys here who put this up in GPC. I think they're doing a fabulous job of making this accessible. Otherwise, it's very difficult to sort of individually catch up with all of these wonderful guys. Thanks a lot. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to be in this conversation. Appreciate you taking out time and look forward to a lot more like this. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.